Hi, welcome back to Tim's Garage. Today I finally get to start underneath the hood on working on some of the components. And I'm going to start by installing one of the charge tubes that I've got laid out here. But before I do that, before I install the charge tube, I wanted to point out a couple of changes that I had, or little modifications I had to make on the airbox itself. So in order to have the charge tube clear as well as it could, I needed to make a couple of little minor modifications to it. And as you can see right here, I ground out some clearance with something called a die grinder in order to be able to get some clearance for the charge tube. The charge tube actually came down and sat, and it fit in there just perfect, but we had a challenge with the charge tube resting right against the material that was here, so I just wanted to give it a little bit of clearance. Over on the far side, I had to clearance it as well, but on that side I didn't do a curved clearance because of the way the charge tube crosses here. I just did a flat angled off, and I'll include in the video 2 photos of how these 2 things look. And one of the things that I wanted to note is that once you grind it with the die grinder, it left it a little bit opaque. And that opacity, you can get rid of that with a high quality heat gun, not a blow dryer, but a proper industrial heat gun. And you can heat the plastic, and as you heat the plastic, you basically melt it and reflow it, and the opacity caused from grinding and reshaping the plastic disappears. And when you look at these in the photos, you'll notice that it's very clean looking, and it doesn't look like it's been carved up again, keeping with looking like it hasn't been modified approach that I'm looking for underneath the hood. One additional thing I did underneath the hood is I mounted something called the DDM Works cross brace. And this is a front frame connector that mounts in the front and reinforces this front area. And it was a super easy install. The only thing I'll make a note of for those that are going to be doing this is that when you remove this bolt and the bolt on the side, it's unbolting an internal brace. And you can just see that brace that's right here. You can see the threads and how the threads aren't exactly centered in the hole. Once I took this bolt out, it was extremely hard to get that bolt back in on this side. And so as a tip for everybody, since this inside bolt is loose inside the frame rail, if you take an awl, something that looks like this, and you place it within this hole and then apply pressure and push, you can force this internal brace over, and then this bolt will just drop down and thread in with your fingers. But if you don't, you run the risk of cross-threading the threads on this, and it might be a very difficult thing to install. So with all of that said, it's now time to actually install the charge tube. And one of the things I've done is I've put a piece of tape on here at the 2-inch mark, just so that I can check engagement when it drops into the forward mounting tube location. So I'm going to go ahead and slide this in, and let's see how easy this fits in as an install. All right, so mount this in, slowly work it into this rear pipe, rear tube, and then it's got to come a little bit further in, and I need to move to the front and pull the tube in the front a little tiny bit. There we go. In. Okay. So I shove it in, so I get if you come around here, the 2 inches of clearance. I want to slide and make sure I get enough engagement in, so I've got the 2 inches of clearance covered. It's in far enough that I've got the engagement, and then when I run the new clamp in, I'll be able to clamp the spring-loaded clamp, the pressurized spring-loaded clamp in right there, and it'll maintain pressure on the hose clamp. And this is under pressure, so those tubes need the stronger clamp on them. And I can now push this all down and get it installed. I'm just going to pull that tape off now, since I know I've got enough engagement, and shove it down in. And I want to shove it down in until I reach the depth that I'm looking for. And pull this one. There we go. All right, so I have the tube actually installed. And I've got the bracket located where it needs to locate. And if you look carefully down here, you can see the tube. If you can zoom in there, the tube is clearanced around the air cleaner assembly down underneath there. If we go down underneath here, there. And you can see how the tube nicely clears on both sides, front and rear, of the actual air cleaner assembly that's located right here and then right up here. And this bolt will line up nicely to secure the clamp right up here. This bolt will line up nicely, and I'll get one and mount it in there. So, and this is one of the bolts that mounts in here. Okay, so I've got the charge tube mounted, located, brackets all installed. It's got the rubberized mounts all noted, and it is 100% installed into the intercooler, and everything clears nicely. There we have it. So we've now got the charge tube installed on this side. I've got the brace across the front. I'm completely finished on this side. I just need to tighten up the hose clamps. I've got these aircraft or Caterpillar clamps with the extra spring clamping tension that's on it, and that's good for, these aluminum tubes tend to expand and contract a lot more than steel does. So by having the springs on here, it allows it to constantly maintain pressure on the tube, and it's less likely that even in cold weather these tubes are going to pop off if you suddenly jump into boost. So I'm just tightening this up. These little ratcheting wrenches come in really handy for this sort of thing. It's kind of a confined space, and it gives the opportunity to be able to do this pretty easily. All right. So we've got this tube nicely done. I've just got the under hood tube to do. Now the front tube is a 2 3/4 inch clamp, and this tube is this clamp here is a 3-inch clamp. So a 3-inch clamp is a little bit larger. This is the final junction that goes into the engine under boost. And once we've got this tightened up, all that's left is to connect the sensors and the tube. There we go. We've got this nice and tight. Clamped down nicely on the tube. I'm simply going to connect up this sensor here. Actually, I need to pull that out from underneath. Give it a little bit more room. Okay, we're going to connect the 3-bar sensor. There we go. And then we're going to put the last tube on for the vacuum reading. I'll just adjust this clamp down with a pair of pliers, and we have the driver's side charge tube fully installed. So with it fully installed, I'm now ready to move on to the other side. I now need to start doing the dirty job, which is removing the turbo on the other side and the downpipe and installing the upgraded components, the big wheel turbo. I'll be back with another video when we choose to go and do that.